Hey, this is Evan Marquardt, dating coach for smart, strong, successful women, your personal trainer for love. Welcome back to the Love You podcast, where you can learn everything there is to know about dating, relationships, sex, and men. We don't talk about sex that much, so maybe I should take that out. But basically, I can tell you how to date and choose better guys, and that's what I'm here for. Today, we are going to be talking about 7 green flags in a guy you're dating. Before we get to that, a little light housekeeping. This is being released right before my birthday. It is not a significant birthday, but it is a birthday nonetheless. And I'm excited. I'm actually one of those people who actually likes to celebrate his birthday because my birthday is during the summer. And every time my birthday comes around, we always have a pool party. And when I have a pool party, I get to invite all my favorite people and make the playlist and choose the food. And there aren't too many days where you get to dictate the entire agenda when you are the husband and the father and the coach. Most of my life is spent in service of other people. So I like having a Father's Day, or I like having a birthday to just do things that I want with the people that I love. So that puts me in really, really good spirits. And I'm hoping some of those good vibes trickle down to you and this podcast. If you are a regular Love You podcast listener and you have not already, click the subscribe button on Apple, click the subscribe button on YouTube, click the subscribe button on Spotify, leave us a comment or a positive review or 5 stars or whatever it is one does to spread the word and spread the love and help other women make better choices with men and get happy. The topic today is one that sort of consistently trends on YouTube, which is what inspired me to do it. And while a lot of this stuff might seem to be obvious from the outside, because it's hard to say anything on the internet anymore that someone else hasn't said a million times before, I do hope that there's value in sharing something that is obvious, because there's things we know and then there's things we live by. The metaphor that I constantly use is that everybody in the world knows how to lose weight. Most people still struggle with their weight. So the issue with most dating relationship things is not knowledge, which again, you can get on any platform, any podcaster, any YouTube channel, any Instagram feed. You can get knowledge. It is the application of that knowledge. It's what you do with this after the podcast that really is going to determine your future success and happiness. So without further ado, 7 green flags in a guy you are dating. If you're taking notes at home, this is the time to begin. If you're writing on your little notes app on your phone. So number 1 green flag in a guy you're dating, good communication skills. And I think there's a certain debate about what good communication skills are. There's the guy who likes to talk about his feelings, and that might be superior to the guy who never talks about his feelings, the inscrutable guy, the mystery, the introvert, the stoic, the traditional Marlboro man. I prefer men who talk about their feelings. But just because a guy talks about his feelings doesn't de facto make him a great communicator. It just means he talks about his feelings. There are guys who talk about their feelings who are, on their spiritual journey, and they're kind of a hot mess. And there are guys who talk about their feelings and they are wildly insecure and they're wildly jealous. There are guys who talk about their feelings who have incredible anger issues, and talking about their feelings is one of their components of expressing them. So good communication skills are not simply about having feelings and being willing to share your feelings. It's also about the ability to listen. It's about the ability to validate. And I think there's a lot of guys who are just really not skilled or taught or trained or self-aware enough to know how very important it is to listen and validate women. The stereotype is that men are fixers. They'll mansplain and they'll stand on their soapbox and they'll tell you what you're doing wrong. And that's a relatively accurate description. Where men often fall down is the ability to listen, which is why the North Star of Love You, my signature course, is finding a relationship with a man who makes you feel safe, heard, and understood. So that's what good communication skills are, is not the can we talk about stuff, but how do I feel after talking about something with him. So a guy who's good at communication, it's not a one-sided thing, right? A lot of guys like to hear themselves talk, go on a date, brag about themselves, don't show any curiosity about your past, your hobbies, your passions, your fears, your story. And you need a guy who does both, not just that he's entertaining to listen to, but he brings something to the table as the listener, the way your best girlfriend would. So to me, that's what good communication skills mean. Number 2, green flag, respectful and kind. And kindness, I think, is an underrated trait. Now, again, when I say kindness, I think a lot of people often get a misimpression. There are lots of nice guys in the universe, and you're not obliged to date just a guy whose sole skill set is being nice, right? Because nice isn't always enough, right? Nice is a baseline, just like chemistry is a baseline. You need a guy who's nice, but a guy who's just nice but doesn't bring anything else to the table is probably not going to be your guy. He's going to fall in, right? And if 45% of guys are, clueless narcissist douchebags, and 45% of guys are like nice friend zone guys, we're still looking at that 10% in the middle. And so he has to be respectful and kind. And we tend, when we're attracted to someone, to even overlook this. Think about some of the relationships perhaps you've had in the past with guys who are not respectful. Right? Guys who are rude to waiters, guys who are rude to your friends or to your family, guys who are rude to you. Not just the way guys can be clueless and insensitive, and I cop to being sometimes clueless and insensitive, but guys who are really consistently condescending or cutting or insulting or make you feel less than, right? And the fact that you put up with it because he's cute, he's attractive, he's good in bed, he makes a good living, he's charismatic, right? We let respect and kindness slide when it comes in this other package. So here is just a reminder to not say respect and kindness is the only thing, but it should be a baseline thing in any relationship. And when you're with a guy who's respectful and kind, you don't even have to think about this as a term, because it's a baseline. It's what you'd expect from people you work with. It's what you'd expect from your closest girlfriends. We shouldn't have lower expectations for guys. So insist on respect and kindness. Without that, you're not going to have a happy relationship, no matter how impressive this guy is. Number 3, emotionally available. And emotionally available on the internet these days, there's a lot of parsing of that terminology. What I mean by emotionally available is not simply very similar to the communication piece. Someone who claims to want a relationship, claims to want intimacy, right? Talks the talk, but actually a guy who walks the walk and leads the walk. And that last part is the key. With an emotionally available guy, and what I'm talking about is emotional availability for a committed relationship, right? Not emotionally available in theory. The guy who's recently divorced, right, is lonely, starting his life over, has a void where his wife used to be, might want to be an incredible boyfriend. That guy is probably not driving toward the same kind of commitment that you want, which is why he's a bad bet, right? On the surface, he would seem to be emotionally available. I've had women tell me, and I've talked about this in a previous podcast, women tell me they love married guys because they're really romantic, they're really passionate. Yeah, they're trapped in a bad marriage, so you get to be the object of all of his passion. It just has a really limited end game when you're with a guy who's married. Similar with guys who are recently divorced or recently separated. So emotionally available for our purposes is not just about a guy who talks the talk, but about a guy who walks the walk. The emotionally available guy is the one who talks it out, right? Volunteers, I want to get married. Volunteers, I want to start a family. Volunteers, after a few weeks of dating, I really like you. I want to take down our profile. I want to explore this relationship. Volunteers to introduce you to his friends and family. Planning weddings, vacations 3 months in advance because he sees you as part of his life. It's the guy who fully integrates you and is not afraid of this conversation because he's initiating it. Why is he initiating it? Because he's emotionally available, he wants commitment, and he wants you. So now as the CEO, all you have to do is figure out if he's the guy for you. You're in the driver's seat because he is the one who's pushing for more. You can't be the person who's trying to pull a guy through the funnel, trying to convince him that with just your love, he will step up and become the man who wants kids, become the man who wants to get married, become the man who wants to prioritize you instead of leaving you as his Friday night booty call. You should never have to convince a guy that you're worthy of that time, that commitment. He should lead the process, and that's what I mean by emotionally available. And that's a definition I haven't heard anybody say on the internet. Number 4, shared goals and values. What we mean by shared goals and values, which is really what we're talking about, compatibility to some degree. It's not to sit down with him on that first date and sort of hash out, I'm a spender, I'm a saver, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert, I'm a Capricorn, I'm a Leo. Shared values and goals come out in the form of the relationship being easy. Right? It comes out in the feeling, again, as a really logical, lawyerly kind of dating coach. I really spend a lot of time dialing into feelings. And so in a good, healthy relationship that's on an upward trajectory, it feels fundamentally easy. It feels like you're in flow state. It feels like you never have to wonder what he's thinking because he volunteers what he's thinking. It feels like you don't have to have many conversations about us. What are we doing? Where is this going? When are we going to counseling? These are not conversations that I've ever had with my wife. And I'm not saying that either of us are spectacular individuals. I'm saying because we were always on the same team, we didn't have to litigate these. We didn't have to sit down and discuss them. They came out in the form of putting one foot in front of another and realizing there wasn't really much to argue or fight about. We didn't have to argue about money. We had middle-class values. We didn't have to argue about kids. We both came from families that loved their kids, devoted a lot of time and resources to them, but also encouraged them to be independent and set healthy boundaries and didn't coddle the kids. We didn't have to argue about libido. We had the same sex drive when we first got married, and we landed at the same sex drive now that we've been together for a really long period of time. We both believe in honesty and transparency and being yourself and not having to contort yourself to be in a relationship. And again, I'm just saying this from my very, very narrow prism. So shared values and goals don't have to be, put on parchment. They're as you date someone for a couple of years before you get engaged, before you move in, before you get married. You get to discover in process as you go through seasons together, this person loses their job, this person has a falling out with their best friend, this person runs into a health challenge, this person has some sort of existential unforeseen crisis that you have to navigate as a couple, or indeed there is a bump in the road. How do you guys get past that bump in the road? How do you patch those kind of things up? And so yes, there's the very obvious, does he want to get married? Does he want to have children? Shared goals and values. But just because a guy wants to get married and have children, theoretically, doesn't mean he's a good partner, right? If you're going to fight about money and sex and going out and household chores. So these are things that come up over time that if you're with a guy who's got a good blend of masculine and feminine, and you do as well, you're going to land in a really healthy place where in my current position, I make the money. My wife is the one who takes care of the house and the kids. She makes dinner. I do the dishes. I throw out the trash. Like there's a nice, healthy division of duties that we never really had to argue or litigate. We just sort of agreed on something that felt good to both of us, where we're making compromises. We're endeavoring to make each other happy. And so our goals were to have a happy, easy, peaceful relationship. And then what are we going to do to achieve that? Neither of us had to censor ourselves, bend over backwards, become someone different to try to contort ourselves or please the other partner. So don't think of this as a checklist. Think of it as a feeling and a process. And if it's working, you'll have relatively smooth sailing in your relationship. And if you find that there's a lot of bumps, things that you have to navigate together, maybe if your relationship requires that much of a challenge while you're dating, it might not be the best fit for you in the long run. I really want to preach easy relationships to you. Number 5, trustworthy and reliable. There are a number of men out there, and I know you know this isn't news, that would appear to be really amazing guys because they have it all together on paper. And they might be fun, and they might be cute, and they might make you laugh. But fundamentally, they're Peter Pans. I did a Peter Pan episode early in the Love You podcast, probably back in 2016. My wife's first husband was a Peter Pan. Sorry if you're listening, but this is a guy who would go out 6 nights a week, but would forget to pay the electric bill. I did an episode recently on whether you're his girlfriend or whether you're his mommy. So the truth is, you don't want a guy who you have to look over, a guy who can't pay the bills, a guy who can't take the time to call you or text you or know how to take the lead in making dinner reservations or travel plans. A guy whose word and deed match up. There's a lot of guys who say, I'm going to do this when. And then there's guys who actually step up and do it, where you never have to doubt their integrity. You never have to wonder where you stand. And they might seem like, well, Evan, you're saying this. Where are these guys? I'm telling you, they exist. The problem is that you have not been choosing them. Right? You've been investing your time on guys who are not trustworthy, who are not reliable, and then wondering, why is this relationship so hard? Right? I don't even know if I could trust my boyfriend to take down his profile. I don't know if I could trust him without checking his cell phone. Right? And so you can't have a healthy relationship with a guy that you don't trust, where you don't know if he's going to wake up next to you the next day, where you have to micromanage all of his goings on. Right? That is not a healthy relationship to be in. So it's not that all men are trustworthy, far from it. It's that we want to lead with trust and see if a man is worthy of trust and see how he follows up with you, which is why relationships don't require micromanaging. They don't require changing him. They don't require criticizing him or lecturing him. It's you are the CEO and he is the intern, and he's doing everything he can to prove to you that he is trustworthy, that he is reliable, so that you can relax and let down your guard and allow him to do for you without the attendant worries that he's going to be a failure like all the rest. Right? But if he fails, he doesn't get much more rope. You don't have to keep that guy in the picture. That's the whole point of having a rotation of interns, is that all of these guys are replaceable. No guy is the last man on earth. So if you're with a guy that you can't trust, and I mentioned my wife's first husband also cheated on her. In retrospect, she realized he was a bit of a fabulist. He would go to parties and tell stories that were kind of true, but not totally true. And she kind of saw it, but didn't pay attention to it. Right? You know what it's like. You've had enough experience with people of integrity, people who are just straight shooters where you never have to wonder where you stand. You should never be in a relationship with someone who is anything but a straight shooter, not just with you, but with everybody in their life. Because if there's a guy who does shady business practices, you could be sure that you can't trust him in a relationship. It's very rare that a person has integrity in one place and doesn't have integrity in another place. Calls to mind a story I told on a previous podcast about a client of mine who announced at the end of her Love You tenure that she got a boyfriend, and then discovered that her boyfriend was the kind of guy who likes to do petty theft. The guy who sort of steals things from Home Depot or doesn't pay for them and can kind of justify it in his brain. And I was like, do you really want to call that guy your husband? And then discover 10 years from now that this guy has had a shaky relationship with telling the truth to you? I wouldn't take that chance, even if it seems like a victimless crime to steal from Home Depot. So trustworthiness, reliability are so very important, which is why when we talk in Love You about the 5 C's, character, kindness, consistency, communication, and commitment, consistency is one of them. Number 6, independence and self-reliance. This sort of dovetails with the does he need a mommy thing. It is a green flag if you have a guy who could do for himself. And I think there are a lot of guys who are just really passive participants in life. They're used to having women tell them what to do. They're not necessarily go-getters. They don't necessarily have a plan for their career. Now, that doesn't mean that that's bad. You don't have to be ambitious to have purpose or to be independent. You could be a high school English teacher and soccer coach and still be independent and confident. You just chose a career that had a lower financial upside, but that doesn't take anything away from you. So I don't want to conflate money with independence or confidence with money. Confidence is a sense of assuredness in who you are and what you're worth. And you're not living on your insecurities. And you're not a cesspool of neediness. You don't need constantly propping up. You don't need someone to make your decisions for you. And I think there are a lot of guys, right? And a lot of women, but we're talking about guys today, who lack inner confidence for reasons that are not entirely their fault, right? They were raised in a critical household. They had fathers who abandoned them. They had moms who didn't give them unconditional love or self-esteem. That carries through their life and becomes their worldview. And it's not your job to rehabilitate them. It's your job to identify sometime in the first 5-6 weeks of dating that this guy doesn't have what it takes to be my equal and opposite partner. I'm thinking of a client recently who was dating a guy. Forgive me if I've told the story before. He was a really, really nice guy, and he was devoted to her. He was crazy about her. Dude could not make a decision, right? She's like, it'd make me really happy if you would make Friday night dinner reservations. And the guy would text something back about how nervous he was about making a decision and hoping she liked it. And again, if there's a dude in his 50s who can't choose a restaurant without your approval, right? Could be a really nice guy, could have a lot of love to give, and he was. And he was a great conversationalist. My client really, really liked him. She just felt she would have to carry everything herself. And part of the virtue of a relationship, as talked about in the previous podcast, is this guy could carry part of the burden of life. So that's why he has to be independent. Yes, you want a guy who thinks of you as the son and he makes you a top priority and his life partially revolves around making you happy, but he needs to have something of his own. Finally, number 7 green flag, and this is not something you can tell from a guy's dating profile, nor is it something you can usually tell from the first few dates, and that is conflict resolution skills. Truly, the only way to figure that out is to go through conflict. Now, ideally, you're in a relationship that's not a terribly high conflict relationship. As I said, I could count probably on one hand the number of times my wife and I had like big fights over the years, but even our big fights were over in an hour and didn't last for days or weeks or months. We've never had a bad week or we've never had a bad month in our relationship, not because, as I've said, my wife and I are special. It's because we're both fundamentally reasonable people who are secure, who love each other, who give each other the benefit of the doubt. And if we get into an argument, it's because we're largely talking past each other. My forte is apologizing. I'm good at apologizing if I say something that I regret. And I do it quickly. I don't double down on a mistake. I do it super quickly. And there's entire books on conflict resolution. One of my favorite ones is Kiss Your Fights Goodbye by Dr. Jamie Turndorf. It's another form of what we call nonviolent communication, how you communicate with someone where you're not attacking them, you're not judging them, you're not making them wrong, right? You're providing validation, you're finding reinforcement for why you love someone, you're expressing your feelings. This thing you're doing makes me feel upset, disconnected, anxious, concerned, lonely, less than. I know it's not your intention, but this thing you're doing makes me feel X. My solution is Y. Right? Here's how we repair this. Instead of just telling a guy what he's doing wrong, here's what we can do. Here's what I would love for you to do. You haven't called me in 3 days. I'm your girlfriend. That makes me feel disconnected from you, and it makes me feel like you're potentially pulling away. I don't want to have that kind of relationship where I have to wonder. So what would make me really happy is if you just checked in every night before you went to sleep. Is that something you could do for me? And a reasonable boyfriend will say yes, and a guy who wants to put his foot down and say no might not be the kind of pleaser that you need to have a relationship. So if you're good at conflict resolution and your guy is not good at conflict resolution, because you're being the adult and you're being reasonable and you're trying not to make him wrong and you're trying to find that point in the Venn diagram where your needs and his needs overlap, if he can't meet you in the middle as a good boyfriend, that lets you know it's not a relationship worth having. So this is why conflict resolution, a guy who's willing to listen and meet you in the middle and compromise and take ownership of his piece of an argument instead of doubling down on a mistake. These are rare skills, but these are important skills, and these are the only way you could have a happy relationship. So you add all these things up, 7 green flags in a guy you're dating. You can't tell all these things from the beginning. Some of these things can only be told after months or sometimes even years. And this is why we have to take a leap of faith on a guy and listen to our feelings, right? And try to screen in at the beginning. And then as a guy reveals, he's not good at communicating. He's not fundamentally kind. He's not emotionally available. He doesn't necessarily share the same goals and values. You can't necessarily trust him or rely on him. He doesn't have the requisite confidence to be an equal and opposite partner in your relationship, right? And when things go wrong, as things inevitably do, right, where you are not on the same page, it blows up into something that's much worse instead of using it as an opportunity to get closer and repair things. If you see these things throughout a relationship, that's a really good sign that this might not be a relationship for you to double down on, right, and invest in. You need to have the courage to say, this is good, but I don't think I can deal with this for the rest of my life. And that's what it means to be a CEO of your love life, to have the courage to be able to say no when something's not working, instead of letting inertia carry you through a relationship where you do not feel like you can relax, or you cannot feel like yourself, and you do not have a guy carrying the equal weight of the emotional burden of the relationship. So keep your standards high, pay attention to these green flags, make sure a guy's meeting your needs along the way. My name is Evan Mark Katz. This is the Love You Podcast. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple, leave us a positive review, share it with a friend. If you haven't done it before, make today the day that you give me that small gift of letting me know what you enjoy about these unique podcasts. And if you have listened to this podcast and realized, I haven't found any guy who gives me even half of those things, this is a great opportunity for you to raise your standards. Go to evanmarkkatz.com/now. Fill out a short application, get on my wait list. I will reach out to you privately, book a time for us to talk and get to know each other, see if coaching is a good fit for you. I very much look forward to that conversation. I thank you, I appreciate you, and I very much look forward to our next conversation on the next podcast next week. Have a great day.